Okay, it's now 10:45 Swedish time. I know we have some non-Swedes in the audience as well. So I think we should get going. I was invited by Sabine to give a short intro to virtual clinical trials and some of the things that we have done at our clinic. And this is a presentation that I have given before in 45 minutes. So now it's only 30 minutes. So if I move quickly through the later slides, then that's to be expected. My name is Erik Rein-Hedin. I'm a physician by training. I'm also a PhD student at Uppsala University, where my research is mainly dedicated to early phase 1 trials and first-in-human trials, trying to improve methodology and conduct and design of phase 1 trials. And I'm working at CTC. It's a contract research organization with in-house clinics in Uppsala in Sweden. So let's get going. Virtual clinical trials. Oh, and please, if you have any questions, you can just type them in the chat or interrupt me at any time. So virtual clinical trials. Well, first of all, virtual clinical trials can be go by different names, such as decentralized, remote, mobile, direct to patient. There are different terminology depending on maybe where you're working or where in the world you are, but the common goal of these trials is to incorporate technology to replace part or all of physical on-site procedures with virtual counterparts. And this can mean many things, such as video calls, or you can have an electronic informed consent process. I know that will be discussed in more detail after my presentation. Apps, websites for self-assessments and questionnaires. You could use wearable technology. Nowadays, a lot of people, not only patients, have wearable technology with some health components in them, such as smartwatches, measuring pulse, etc. You could, if possible and legal, where you are conducting your trial, have some kind of direct-to-patient supply, for example, of the study drug. But you could also have the kind of hybrid approach where you use satellite sites or mobile clinics that are working closer to where the patient is located as compared with where the trial site is. And as I just mentioned, the common goal is to move the intervention, evaluation, and collection of data from the clinic to the patient's usual environment. And this can thus be anything from fully virtual, where you more or less do everything remotely or in a virtual setting, or what is probably more common, a hybrid approach where you maybe incorporate maybe just one or a few virtual elements into your trial.
Hello, Erik. This is Anna. Sorry if I interrupt, but are you still on page 1? Because I can still see it on my screen. I'm
okay,
not sure.
No, I'm not. So thank you very much. Okay, let's see. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing and share again. Okay, how about now are the slides progressing?
No, it's the same.
Maybe if you choose presenter mode, I'm not sure if you can.
Well, I know we don't have a lot of time, so maybe if I could just wait, I'll just share my screen and can work from there. Okay, so now you see my whole screen, right?
Yes.
Very good. Okay, so I'm sorry for that. I thought it would you would see the same screen I was seeing. So what I just mentioned was that yes, virtual clinical trials can incorporate a lot of different technologies, and the common goal is to move intervention, evaluation, and collection from the clinic to the patient's usual environment, and that it can be anything from fully virtual to including maybe just one or two virtual elements. And here are just a few examples of virtual trials that I have found that I think are maybe pioneering in one sense or another. So if we go back some 20 years in time to 2001, we have this study by Eli Lilly, where they studied tadalafil in Sweden. It's sold under the brand name Cialis for erectile dysfunction. And what they did in this trial was that they asked the subjects to fill out an online questionnaire. Doesn't sound very novel or pioneering today, maybe, but we have to remember that 20 years ago, online electronic medical records in healthcare in general was quite a new concept. Moving 10 years into the future, 2011, we had a remote trial by Pfizer. The study drug was Tolterodine in Sweden. It's sold under the brand name Detrositol. And they recruited via the web and smartphones, as well as collected data online. This study proved to be quite difficult. They weren't able to meet the recruitment target. As you may or may not know, Detrositol or Tolterodine is used for overactive bladder. So the patients were mostly in the higher age range. And it was seen that the elderly subjects had limited technology skills that may have proved an obstacle. And they were also quite concerned with sharing their health data online because they didn't consider it to be safe, or they weren't used to doing that. Another 4 years into the future, in 2015, we had the Verco study by Sanofi. And this might have been the first fully virtual or remote trial in Europe, as far as I know. And this was not a drug trial, it was a device trial with a 3G wireless glucose meter. So they recruited 60 diabetic patients in Finland, and they were all recruited through Facebook. And if the last trial by Pfizer was unable to meet their target and proved to be quite difficult, this study was actually perceived as convenient and time-saving, both by the study team and by the patients. And when asked after the finish of the trial, the site staff estimated that they had spent maybe about 1/3 of the time compared to a regular study. Another example of a pioneering VCT could be this trial started in 2018. It's called the At-Home PD study. This is actually an observational follow-up study of Parkinson's disease patients, where they have annual web-based video calls with their neurologist or investigator to visually examine the disease status of the Parkinson's disease. And the reason why I first was invited to talk about VCTs was because we did a kind of more or less fully virtual clinical trial in 2017 to 2019. And I'm going to start off by showing a very short video presenting this trial. And I have to maybe apologize in advance because it's kind of like an infomercial, but it is what it is. So I hope you can also hear the sound from this video now. If not, please.
We meet the patients on their terms by using a telemedicine-based platform. In January 2018, CTC started a clinical trial that is 100% conducted over the web. The new way of working allows our Uppsala-based recruitment team to enroll patients in our study from all over Sweden. It is very easy. Our recruitment team pre-screens patients that are interested. Secondly, our investigator meets the patients over a secure video link in which both the patient and the physician are identified via bank ID. If the patient is willing to participate in the trial after he or she has been given information about the study by the investigator, they both sign the informed consent via bank ID. All visits are done in this way, and both research nurses and investigators talk to the patients through the system. The product that is to be taken by the patients are either sent to them by courier or can be picked up at a clinic or pharmacy nearby their home. CTC is pioneering a future way of translating science into treatment over the web.
So this trial, I know you all have experience with clinical trials. So this was a double-blinded, randomized, placebo-controlled parallel group study where we evaluated the effect of a probiotic product with the Lactobacillus reuteri on recurrent urinary tract infection. In Swedish, that is recidiverande urinvägsinfektion in adult women recently treated for UTI and urinvägsinfektion. So the basic idea for this trial was that we screened these women with recurrent urinary tract infections. They were randomized to either the probiotic product or placebo product for 90 days, and then we follow them for another 90 days. Some of the key inclusion criteria for this study, we needed 140 women in the age range 80 to 50 with recurrent urinary tract infection. You may know that urinary tract infections is one of the most common infections we have, and one of the most common reasons to seek medical care, especially for infection. So they needed to have recurrent UTIs, meaning at least a fixed number per year or half year, and otherwise be healthy. They needed to be currently on their antibiotic treatment at the time of screening. And in Sweden, we use narrow spectrum antibiotics for UTI, and the treatment period is usually only 3 to 5 days, which means that as soon as they were on their antibiotics, we needed to screen them more or less the next day. They also needed to be able to start taking this product during or within 5 days from the stop of the antibiotic treatment, which meant that the window of opportunity here was pretty narrow. We needed to screen them exactly when they were on their antibiotics, and then they needed to start the study more or less a few days after the screening visit. And I will get back to why we think it was favorable to use a virtual setting for this trial. They also needed to have access to bank ID, and for non-Swedes, bank ID is the most common electronic signature in Sweden. I think it's used by over 90% of all smartphone users in Sweden today. And they also needed to have the ability to use an e-health platform that could be accessed by a computer or a smartphone. This is just an ad that we used for this trial. This is from a tram, Spårvagn in Gothenburg. And the method of this trial was that if a woman was willing and interested in this trial, they signed up on our website. They were sent information about the trial via email, and they were also sent the written informed consent form and information, and then we scheduled a video call with an investigator, which in this case was me. The screening visit was conducted entirely online, and we used like a video call, e-health video call platform, just similar to what some of the online healthcare providers are using, where you also log in with your bank ID. And we started off, of course, with the informed consent process as per usual, and then we both signed the consent form via our bank IDs before progressing to the actual screening visit. And if they were deemed suitable after the screening visit, they were sent the participation card, instructions on the product, how and where to pick it up, as well as instructions for filling out an electronic diary that was used during the trial. So the information, the subject information was then sent to one of several pickup sites. In this trial, subject could pick up the product in one of 5 cities: Malmö, Gothenburg, Linköping, Stockholm, Uppsala. And this meant that, as I said a few slides ago, we needed to include the subjects just right at the time when they were having their infection and were on their antibiotics. So by having 5 cities where they could go and pick up the product, we were able to include women from quite a big part of Sweden. Also women who were maybe not living in one of their cities, but they were able and willing to travel just to pick up the product one time. That was actually the only mandatory physical visit of this trial. We were also in some cases able to ship the product directly to the patient. They took the product at home for 90 days, and they used an electronic diary for reporting, among other things, sexual activity and UTI symptoms. And the rest of the study was more or less conducted over the phone, in some cases also by video if deemed necessary. So the research nurse would give them a call after they picked up the product, just to make sure they had picked it up and they had taken the first dose, and if they had any questions. And then we had monthly follow-up calls, collecting information on symptoms, adverse events, concomitant medication, etc. So what were some benefits of doing this trial in a more or less truly virtual setting? Well, first of all, we were able to quite rapidly include subjects in several regions in Sweden. And there was only one mandatory physical visit. That was when they picked up the actual product at one of the pickup sites. And the pickup sites were mostly also where they could pick up the product at one of our sites, but also at other CROs in Sweden that we were cooperating with. As site staff, we were able to monitor their self-assessments and subject reports continuously. And you may have, if you have experience with electronic diaries, you also know that if they don't fill out the diary, you can have alerts in the system that alerts the study staff that a subject has not filled in their diary. They could also be provided with urine dipsticks if necessary. And by conducting this trial, if in this way, we were able to keep the study team quite small. We did have backups, but I was more or less the only investigator on the trial, and we only had 2 research nurses, even though we had 140 patients in the study. Another benefit of doing this trial in this way is that it's a known IP. This is a probiotic product, which means that it's not a medical product. It's not classified as a läkemedel in Sweden. It's well known. There are no known moderate or severe adverse events, which also makes it probably more suitable to allow the subjects to take this at home without having to have more surveillance than we did in this trial. This is a product that could be sold more or less anywhere as a functional food product. And the endpoints suited were also deemed suitable for remote measurement. If we're talking about urinary tract infections, urinvägsinfektioner, this is what we call a symptom diagnosis, which means that to give a patient a diagnosis of UTI, you don't need to do a physical examination if they have the typical symptoms. You also don't need to have any lab tests if they have 2 out of 3 key symptoms, according to the guidelines that we use here in Sweden. But of course, there are also limitations and challenges. In this case, electronic diary, again, some of you probably have experience with them. Yeah, whenever you hear talk about electronic diaries and trials, you will hear sighs from the site team. We know they can be difficult, they can be technically challenging, and we also know that it could be just simply difficult to remember to fill them in. Whenever you use new technology, you need to develop technical solutions that are suitable for the trial. All systems need to be in compliance, of course, with regulations and standards. So there is extra work associated with doing things in a virtual or decentralized way. One could also argue that there are limitations associated with self-reported data. Is the data quality on par with a study where we had maybe have the subjects come in to the clinic every now and then? In this study, we argued that we also had the placebo group that we could use for comparison, and that the self-reported data would be sufficient. And as mentioned again, this product is a functional food product. So in this case, we only needed approval from the ethical review authority, Etikprövningsmyndigheten. There was no need for approval from the Medical Products Agency here in Sweden. So that was just a brief introduction and experience from a virtual trial, and I think what we also saw that subjects found it. We think that they found it quite easy to use these electronic systems and video platforms. If we again compare with the so-called pioneering examples that I gave a few minutes ago, obviously a lot has happened in the last 5 to 10 years, and especially considering the COVID pandemic, where more or less everyone have gotten used to using video meetings, working from home, etc., and different solutions. Urinary tract infections and recurrent urinary tract infections are also prevalent in a younger population that are also very used and have grown up more or less with the smartphone in their hand. So we did not see any major hurdles or barriers as far as technology was concerned in this trial. I will now shift focus just a little bit. These slides are just quite text heavy, but this is just to highlight what some of the guidelines and guidances that have come from regulatory agencies in different countries. This is a guidance from the FDA, Food and Drug Administration in the US, enhancing the diversity of clinical trial populations. And one of the things that they bring to the table in this guidance is that we should make trial participation less burdensome for patients. And they give a few examples here in this guidance. And what they're writing is that we should consider whether some flexibility in visit windows is possible, or if electronic communication or digital health technology tools can be used to replace site visits and provide investigators with adequate real-time data. So this is something that is actually encouraged from a regulatory point of view. Also, considering the pandemic and especially in 2020, there was a urgent need to try to adapt, if possible, all ongoing clinical trials to the new reality of the ongoing pandemic. And there have been guidances and guidance documents from agencies all over the world, and this is also from the US. And what they're writing in this guidance is that since trial participants may not be able to come to the visits due to the pandemic, one should evaluate if alternative methods can be used. But it should also be stressed here, and this is something that we also always need to keep in the back of our heads, is that this can only be implemented when necessary and feasible, meaning that this is of course only appropriate when it is sufficient to assure the safety of trial participants, which is of course always our #1 priority. Moving across the pond to the EU, quite similar guidance from the EMA, the European Medicines Agency, and their conclusion is also more or less the same. If a trial participant is not able to come to the site, we can consider other measures such as phone or telemedicine to identify AEs and ensure oversight. And just the same again, the limitations and risks of such methods must be taken into account. A bit closer to home, if you're in Sweden, is this guidance from the Danish Medicines Agency, which I think is quite good, and they have given this a lot of thought. So if you want to dive deeper into VCTs, I think this is a good place to start. What they are stressing in this guidance is that the development of VCTs can help ensure equality regardless of mobility and physical distance. And this is really one of the key concepts of VCTs, that we want to make it easier and less burdensome for patients and volunteers to participate in trials, and also to enable us to have a wider representation of trial participants, such as underrepresented groups or patients living in remote areas, which is common in a country like Sweden. And in Sweden, we have had this, maybe some of you have even been involved in this project by the Swedish Medical Progress Agency, where they had a pilot project where a handful of studies were conducted from 2020 to 2021. I know some of them are probably still ongoing, to establish kind of a foundation for how clinical trials can be conducted in a decentralized way in Sweden, with support from the MPA. So in conclusion, some of the benefits of doing virtual trials is that we can increase, hopefully, subject availability and enrollment. We can have better representation, both by including underrepresented groups that may not have the time to travel or the interest to travel to the clinic, or just by the fact that they are unable to travel for physical reasons or maybe social reasons even. Subject retention could also be improved if we can make the trials more convenient for the patient. It could possibly reduce the workload for site. And this is, of course, given that everything is working flawlessly. We all know how ECRFs can behave, but best case scenario, we can reduce the workload for the site. We also have the possibility to remotely monitor data in real time, more or less, if that is how we set up our study. And possibly, maybe it could also be cost efficient. On the other side, some challenges that may present themselves. This is, of course, not suitable for all trials. Technical barriers can be a big obstacle, and poor tech support can more or less ruin any trial. There may be concerns over data privacy and integrity. I think probably in Sweden, most patients and people in general feel quite safe sharing information online if they know where they put it. But they could also have concerns over data quality. Also, depending on where in the world you're conducting a trial and with which sponsor you're working, there might be a smaller or bigger level of conservatism and cultural aspects, both from patients and from the sponsor or even the regulatory agency. So I know we're almost out of time now, so I will just very quickly go to my last slide. So a few take-home messages when someone suggests that you should conduct a virtual trial, I think you should consider that not everything can be virtual, but some trials can be partly virtual by using a hybrid approach. And virtual trials are encouraged by regulatory authorities, more or less everywhere, but the concept is still fairly new. And if you are in doubt if a virtual solution is appropriate, these are some bullets to remember, and this more or less goes for anything in clinical trials, so there's no real difference here. First and foremost, will a virtual solution negatively affect the safety of the volunteers or patients in any way? If so, don't do it. Will it negatively affect the integrity? If so, don't do it. Will it negatively affect the quality? If so, don't do it. And how will it affect the patient directly? Try to think of the virtual solution from the subject's point of view, if it's positive or negative. Yeah, so that was my last slide. I haven't kept track of the chat now, so I don't know if there are any questions. Thank you.
There are no questions in the chat, Erik.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Okay, so I will then give the screen and word to the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Erik. It was a great presentation by you, and great to see all the things that you have done in virtual clinical trials, and we are so happy to be collaborating with you as well. Let me see if I can put on my camera. Yes, and then I will try to share my screen as well and our presentation. So, hello everyone, can you see and hear us?
Anna, can you put it in the presenter mode?
Yes, I have put it in presenter mode.
But I don't know if it's a delay, but I don't see it. If everybody sees presenter mode or...
No, we don't see it in the presenter view.
Okay, I will try again and see. Maybe I try to share the screen instead. Is it working?
Yeah,
Yes.
no, it looks good.
Good. Okay. So thank you very much for having us here today. My name is Anna Landström. I'm a clinical research manager from MSD. I'm here today together with my colleague, Rashmi Ramachandra, who is clinical operations manager. And we would like to just discuss the e-consent or electronic informed consent from a sponsor perspective. We had a great collaboration with CTC in one of our trials, and we were actually, Sweden was first country worldwide in an MSD trial who had e-consent in a clinical trial. And we have a quite short presentation, so we have room for discussions and questions, and we cannot reveal any study-specific details for now, so it's a high-level presentation. So as Erik has discussed previously, why are we using e-consent? Well, it's basically a patient-centric approach to make it easier for the patients. And we think that it could especially be useful when reconsent is required because the patients don't have to come to the sites to sign a new informed consent form. They can rather have it electronically signed in their home. We wanted to implement the e-consent in a pilot in one of our studies, just to gain more insights and experience in how to use electronic informed consent as an alternative to the conventional paper consent forms. And we wanted to use this experience to expand the usage further in our different clinical trials in various therapeutic areas in the Nordics. We also have a very strong life science strategy. We also have great support from the Pharma Trade Association and our health authorities, as Erik also mentioned. So we have been had really good support to implement this e-consent pilot. The study in scope, which we have been using this e-consent, is a phase 3 randomized double-blind active comparator controlled vaccine study. And we chose this study because it's quite straightforward study design, and that study participants, they are mainly healthy, they are adult, and we anticipated that they would be able to have bank IDs and equipment such would be needed for...
Så här istället för...
Oops, somebody is not muted. So in this study we had informed consent obtained at visit 1, and it was actually obtained on site because we couldn't implement fully electronic informed consent now, but we thought that if we have an ICF update during the study, we could have a reconsent later in the study. And so we had, why did we choose this study? So we had already 2 sites that were offering e-consent from a platform called Assently, and it was the CTC sites. And we had also already received approval from the ethics committee and health regulatory authorities for this study because we submitted this alternative from the beginning. So we have already approved both e-consent and traditional paper informed consent form. And as I mentioned, the study population was also favorable to try this pilot in. And it will also provide subjects to have ample time to read and think about the informed consent prior to the on-site visit. And the study design and the protocol is also quite favorable to test this platform and to gain more practical learnings and experience. Also, this study had a quite short recruitment time, around 4 months. So it's ideal to assess our results and learning and in order to expand it further to other studies.
Thank you, Anna,
Yes.
for a very nice introduction, and you said most of that, so you made my job easy. And thank you, Erik, for a very wonderful presentation. You highlighted some of the important points using a virtual clinical trial, and here I would like to focus on the e-consent process as it is a high level so I will not go into very much detail, but rather just briefly mention that as per the study design, we kind of made a custom-made process for us, and it was a great collaboration with CTC. And for that, we had to have both internal and also like SOPs developed and also an additional SOP developed even from the site's perspective, which could go with the study. So in simple words, it is the phone contact was the first part where the potential subjects were reached out and also sent the informed consent in an electronic format in an encrypted way. And In the first one, there's no signing part of it, so the subjects had a lot of time to go through it, think about the study, and if they're really willing to participate in the study, because as Anna mentioned, that there was it was a hybrid system that we used, where they had visit 1, where they meet the doctor and they sign the consent the same time. So although it was electronic, here we wanted to know how the process is, and we also wanted to confirm that everything from the regulatory perspective and also according to clinical trial ICH GCP principles, that we follow everything correctly. So the first signature, when the subject is interested and would like to participate, signs during the visit 1. And the subject would have read, and they had an ample of time, so could ask questions and everything. And the signing process is normal electronic signing process, where it is done through this secure system, bank ID, which makes it also legally bound by this encrypted link, which is sent again to the subjects, where the subject signs first and it is signed later through the same kind of link by the doctor or the principal investigator. Since the design is more like a hybrid, we plan, if there are any reconsents during this study, we would like to do it completely remote. That is, including a video talk where the doctor has a video talk with the subject, and then they sign the consent through this video talk, and also so that it has both parts of it. As Anna mentioned, this is more a pilot for us to learn a lot of different movements. As you know, that this is electronic system, it is also like it has to be according to the compliance, that it meets all the security compliances as per the EU regulations, and it does. So we will assess this later on since the study is short, we have time to assess, and if everything goes fine, we would like to expand this to other studies. Next slide, please. Yes, what are the benefits or take home, since it's a patient-centric approach? So this can be a kind of a help for other studies which has traditional designs like paper consent, and this can be expanded to other studies. And it is also patient reach out, especially elderly patients who cannot travel, and also long distance patients or subjects. They don't have to travel, but can be involved in the study by this electronic consent, or like the virtual clinical trials. It also enhances patient recruitment to studies, because more and more people would like to participate, because it might be more beneficial sitting at home and then giving a consent, so there are reduced travels. And we also think that there are some administrative burden for both the sites, that's the clinic, and also the subjects or patients. And from the compliance perspective, it's a better compliance with timely reconsents, and also a very good quality that as per the ICH GCP principles, and we are supposed to have a good quality, that the signature is in place. For example, the subject should sign first, followed by the doctor. So all these things are maintained. And from the sponsor monitoring perspective, it was very easy platform, easy to monitor, with all the signature time, audit trail, among others, which was observed. And it was also, now it is not currently that you can do source data verification from remote, but in future maybe an opening for it. So it is only, I can see positive things with it. of course, keeping in mind all the other risks, which Erik also described in his presentation. But I would think this is very positive sign for future hybrid virtual trials. So that was it from us.
Yes, and
Thank
I can
you.
also agree that we have, we thought it was really smooth system, very easy to monitor compared to having different paper forms and versions to keep track, and very legible and easy to follow. So it has been really good for us. So,
any questions?
let me see if I can see the chat, if we have anything.
I can see the chat. I will see what it's.
Yep.
It says. It's from Hazel. Thank you to all presenters this morning. I have 2 questions on e-consent, and I'm based in the Republic of Ireland. 1, with paper consent, I would need to ensure that I had the hospital header, study logo, etc. on the. Oh, sorry, I can't see it. Here. With paper consent, I would need to ensure that I had the hospital header, study logo, etc. on the consent form. With e-consent, I'm noticing that the emphasis on headed paper, ensuring all logos are on the e-paper, is no longer required. Does this mean that there are different requirements between consent obtained on paper versus e-consent, or was the need for headed paper not as necessary as previously thought?
Well, actually, the electronic informed consent form in itself is exactly the same as the paper version. So there is no difference in that part.
Okay, thank you. The second question is, any thoughts, opinions, experience on assent, especially in pediatrics? How sure are you that e-assessment is voluntary and informed?
Well, of course, if you need to have electronic fully remote consent, which we haven't done yet, we need to have that kind of a video call to see directly, where the investigator can directly speak to the patient. So I think that's where we are now. So I think the trial needs to have that option to be able to have a remote visit via a video call when obtaining fully remote consent. So in our trial, we have just tried it on site.
Thank you.
So, and yes.
Did this answer your question?
And if needed for reconsent, it would be the same, that we would need to have the investigator to see the patient virtually via a video call.
Okay. I've got a thank you here from the person asking. So
thank you.
Answer has been delivered. Thank you.
Yeah, and sorry, I don't mean to hijack your presentation here, but just from an investigator point of view, having done this process quite a few times, I think if you do a video call, it's really not much difference from when you're doing the traditional informed consent process. Just the difference is, instead of sitting next to each other in the office, the doctor's office, you're doing it in this setting. So of course, you, as an investigator, you always need to make sure that the subject is adequately informed, that then all questions have been answered, and depending on the trial, we might have to maybe ask some check questions sometime to really see that they have really read and understood. But apart from that, I don't really see any major difference.
It's great to hear your experience,
yes.
Erik. Yeah, thank you.
And from I just wanted to add, from sponsors' perspective, we need to say that think also about the logs, like we enter everything, what kind of consent is taken. That was also very easy to take in and very well taken care of.
I have another question in the chat. for you at MSD. Did you use Swedish bank ID systems as the e-signature? Did any other countries participate with their own country e-signature systems in the study?
Anna, would you like to take or?
You can go ahead. I think you have that.
Yeah. Here it was only Swedish ID because the study was in Sweden, and the 2 sites were in Sweden, and more of the subjects were from Sweden. This is also a limitation, as Erik said, that it can be the Assembly system is not built yet for taking from the other countries, but what I heard recently, they're planning to, but currently it's only limited to Swedish patients or population for the bank ID.
Thank you. There are no more questions in the chat.
Okay, so
Thank
you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Have a
Very
wonderful
interesting.
day.
Thank you. Do I need to do anything now, or will you take over the screen? Yes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Johnson. I'll start sharing my screen. I'm the next one up. All right. All right, can everybody see okay?
Perfect.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for giving the feedback real fast. So I come from a different perspective. My name is Elizabeth Johnson. I'm an assistant professor at Montana State University College of Nursing in Bozeman, Montana. So I'm coming at you at, I think it's 3:45 in the morning for us right now. And we're going to kind of pivot in my presentation based off of MSD and Erik's presentation. I'm really lasered in on the technology use for decentralized models of clinical trial delivery. And like I mentioned, I come from a different perspective in the fact that I'm a nurse. I was a research nurse for 10 years, as well as a clinical trial manager, and now into this professor position at Montana State. I have the privilege of looking at how decentralized trials can be implemented in my state. My state's the 4th largest land mass in the US, but our population can fit into a much smaller state like Rhode Island. So we're very geographically distanced apart. We have frontier conditions in the northern part and eastern part of our state, meaning that sometimes we have 1,300 people per one physician. So decentralized models are seen as a very interesting opportunity for those in the Rocky Mountain West in the United States. I also come from the background that I am an inventor of wearable device technology myself, and recently won an American Nurses Association pitch competition for wearable device technology in clinical trials. So this is a topic near and dear to my heart. So we already kind of went through the decentralized trial overview and what it is. I'll be adding a little bit of more contextual flavor as a nurse to that. We'll look at the integration of technology right now in decentralized trials. And then the reason that I'm here today, after having the pleasure of meeting Sabine, is to provide a bit of the clinical research nurse voice as to the opportunities and challenges that we've seen in technology. And this was derived from a large pilot study of a survey of clinical research nurses in the United States, Republic of Ireland, United Kingdom, and Australia, asking them about their feelings about decentralized trials, the barriers, the facilitators of such, and what we can do to help have a smoother decentralized trial experience, given the fact that, especially in the US, we're seeing this model now move towards earlier phase studies. So we'll talk also about wearable technologies and what's on the horizon for them. And I've also provided a couple of resources for references in case you'd like to learn some more. So we've talked about what is a decentralized trial. Erik and the MSD team did a great job about talking about the technology part, right? That we can be virtual. It can include wearable devices. It also can include sensory components. The part that I'll be really kind of focused on at this presentation is the home-based part. That when we're looking at home-based components of decentralized trial delivery, the important thing to understand here and for our wearable devices is that the participant doesn't live in a silo, right? They live in a community, they live in a family system. So when we are deploying these types of models, something that we really look at is how is the community involved and how is the family involved? Are we able to not only just reduce travel burden, but what other benefits are we able to provide and what other considerations should we provide, such as caregiver involvement? It made me think during the e-consent talk when we're talking about pediatric assent, for example. When we think about assent, I know in the United States, our assent documents are just growing. The last one I did for a phase 1 was over 12 pages for the child and 52 pages for the parents. So when we think about the technology incorporate or integration of consent with some really complex information that can be very long to go through, how is the caregiver involved in this process? And what is their comfort and their acceptance of technology? And how do we evaluate those things, given that this won't occur in a silo? The other thing that I think of with decentralized trials, and as part of the definition, is how do we manage the investigational product? This, again, is a de-siloed component where we have to look at partnerships with pharmacies. Like I mentioned here in Montana, we're very geographically diverse. And what that means for us is that we don't have a Walgreens or CVS or I guess Boots or, a major pharmacy on every corner. Many of these are small mom and pop pharmacies that at some point may have to dispense and be delegated to dispense investigational product if it can't be directly shipped to home. So how do we manage that? How do we manage the safety, the education, the administration components? All of these are considerations when we're looking at what is a decentralized trial. Now, something that we also have to break down when we're kind of taking ourselves out of the four walls of our clinic or our research facility is the resources. So in traditional trial delivery, we're site-based, right? We have on-site resources. If you need pulse oximetry, if you need blood pressure, if you need a consult, you're able to go down the hall or be able to pull something out of the closet. It's very controlled. We're able to have central documentation, right? If you have an electronic health record system or your regulatory gal is just down the corner, we have that in-house. Well, in a decentralized model, we're guests now, and we're in the participants realm. We're working out of where we have that power and authority, and we've shifted it now to the participant and their domicile. So sometimes we find ourselves having to work with the community on resources. For example, research nurses here sometimes have to partner with clinics. If it's a remote delivery and say, hey, can I use a room in your clinic to consent this person if they're not able to go directly to the home? Or can I use your machine or equipment if we're not able to contract out to home health services? Obviously, it's also widely uncontrolled. One of the challenges that we had with a decentralized trial in California, for example, in Southern California, was the fact of lack of air conditioning in some of the participants' apartments. So not only are you going up a third floor walk up in Los Angeles, but maybe there's not enough air conditioning. Maybe it's hard to control the stability of the IP or the ability to have the infusion go, or maybe there's just not enough room for all the fitting of the equipment. Moreover, we could have multiple sources of documentation. If we're contracting home health nurses or district nursing to help us with some of the assessments or the monitoring of a patient, they may have their own charting or documentation. How do we also help influence their orders then and train them? So lots of things to think about when it comes to documentation. But where we all are kind of intersecting is the incorporation of digital health, the fact that we always share ethical or legal challenges, just maybe in a different way. And we all need skilled communication in order to make the models work. And we'll go into that a bit more. So when we're looking at technology, it's a form of communication, it's a form of monitoring, but does it help or really hinder? And I think that's a question that we're all trying to answer for ourselves as we're kind of jetting off into the fourth industrial revolution, as they're calling it. Now, when I looked at the Swedish MPA, they had some very interesting takes on this that I'd like to share. 6 different type of bucket considerations. The first was, and Erik touched on it so beautifully, about validation. This is where we kind of have a caution symbol, right? Where how do we validate, for example, novel wearable devices or novel medical devices? If you have poor connectivity or patchy utilization, it's really hard for those companies to then demonstrate or validate their products. But at the same time, we do need that real world evidence, that pragmatic perspective of, is this going to work in the patient population that we seek to market to? So challenges there that really rely on infrastructure, technological infrastructure. Chain of custody. This is a place where we've seen some really great success with temp tails, with technology on sensitivity, as far as our investigational product with shipping, with able to demonstrate that the product is stable. So chain of custody, we've had a great success with technology integration. Privacy and confidentiality, this is another caution area for us. Cybersecurity is a huge consideration, particularly when we're looking at remote wearable devices. There's a huge, increase in adoption of actigraphs, use of Apple Watches, iPads. But where does the line blur between private data and the clinical trial data? How do we help with informed consent of your data being recorded by those remote devices? For some patients, it's not very easily understood where that line is blurred and where they could say yes or no or decline to have their information used. When does that information stop being recorded? So it's a bit of a challenge, not only to communicate how privacy and confidentiality can be maintained, especially in the technological sphere of cloud computing and all the other things that we do, but also how do we build it in and integrate it within our decentralized models? Cost efficiency is up for grabs. We've had varying reports of the cost of efficiency for research sponsors to sometimes that decentralized trials cost more to conduct because of all the outsourcing that needs to happen. Meaning that if you need home health nursing or district nursing to help with certain infusions or monitoring, especially as we get into more early phase research, if you need specific contracting with local pharmacies, for example, these things add up. So when we're also looking at enrollment and recruitment, for example, and I'll just skip to that for a minute, is there a true return on investment with how we're able to enroll and recruit? Sure, we're able to reduce travel burden, but are we actually able to see an increased enrollment? And the jury seems to still be out with this, depending on the different and mixed reports from some of the larger decentralized studies, as well as the smaller ones that have been happening, for example, in Appalachia, here in the United States and in the Southeast United States. Traceability has been very helpful as well, and again, a win. So when we're looking at rigid concrete measurement and IP-related technology integration, seems like a home run. But I wanted to provide a quick example of where nursing's voice and the CRN's voice can really help shape decentralized trial model delivery, especially when we're including technology. And this is an example very close to what we've seen in Montana, and I'll provide our Montana examples too. But let's say that you have a smartphone application with our dear old friends, those medication diaries. You know, we love them and we hate them. So this one, it has a little jingle reminder that says, hey, you need to take your IP medication, and then also has a symptom diary that includes how they're feeling prior to administration. And then what happens is that data goes straight to the PI and the research team are able to review adherence. But they've noticed that they haven't been seeing a lot of uptake from the participant. And so the PI reaches out to this participant and says, I'm not seeing you really inputting all your IP administration. What's going on? Well, the patient says, well, you know what? I feel watched. I really don't like the fact that this thing is pinging my phone. I don't like the fact that I'm having to input how I'm feeling, and I'm having connectivity issues anyways. I keep trying to get tech support, but I'm not getting anywhere with it, and I'm just very frustrated. So I'm not going to include it. And this is something that we've heard quite a bit, but maybe that's where the CRN could have come in at the way start at the beginning of the trial design of asking the question to the patient population within that community, for example, or within the communities, targeted communities, of saying, what questions might you have about using this? Can you tell me more about how you would feel about using the technology? An app is not sometimes simply an app, especially if somebody has the feeling of conservatism, as Erik pointed out, where they're wondering how their data is used, or if it's something that they're interested in how their data is used. Research nurses are extremely skilled communicators and very resourceful when it comes to motivational interviewing and also asking the question of populations. We had this problem, for example, in orthopedic surgery here in Montana, where we had a smart device that could be implanted into a new joint. And we found that our elderly population was wildly against the wearable that was part of this smart device that essentially could tell us if there was an infection beginning or not. We're trying to keep them out of the hospital. And the elderly, even though there's large benefit potentially to identifying infections early, they said no to the wearable devices because they didn't like the feeling of being watched, and they felt that it was fussy. And also they couldn't see it, just from a human factors perspective, the tiny text that was on the watch, telling them and prompting them to see how they're feeling and take their temperature. So the quotes that you see on the screen now are from research nurses from all across the globe. And I wanted to provide these just to give you guys some voice as to what research nurses are reporting back. So just to call out a couple things, certain age groups do not handle technology well. I think this is kind of established. But this is kind of near to my heart as from Montana with our indigenous populations that maybe do not have access to technology or internet, may not have a mobile phone, poor connectivity. Sometimes the hospital systems don't want to use technology integration within their decentralized models because we can't share anything due to private, health information. There may be legal issues. Not all the states in the US even allow telehealth visits. So it's hard to keep patients on schedule. But here's some opportunities that nurses have called out. They love the in-home services, that if we have home visiting research nurses, they can take time face to face to go through and make sure everything's understood with the protocol and research process. They can also help with, as far as the research nurses, to help with consistency and training and standardized policies, being that 1,000-yard view for the sponsor as well as the investigator. Having links and interoperability between websites, digital devices, and pharmacies. Using your resources in the community to help with video calls. And just more support services. Of course, when we're going into homes, we see that there may be more support necessary for participants, not only for the success of the trial, but the success of a person. So how can we help our aides, our caregivers, look at housing? How can we also be an extension of public health? So I'll leave you with this. We're called the next fourth industrial revolution with technology, and clinical trials are racing forward. That the market for decentralized trials is predicted to grow almost 40%. We're talking about $9.1 billion by 2026. So this model's here to stay. But I strongly encourage my colleagues on the phone and those in the room here at the conference to look at research nurses, not just as end users or those that are helping and delegated to manage the trial, but they're actually the architects of the research conduct. They're the ones that know these communities, know these patients, and moreover are skilled experts in research conduct delivery. So while we may see technology as the scaffold to get the data that we want, remember that participants are the foundation, and the CRNs can help us give us that voice. Otherwise, I have my contact information here, should you ever want to talk to a Montanan. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I will see if there are any questions in the chat. No, there are no questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Elizabeth.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you very much for getting up so very early and sharing this presentation with you. So this is maybe a $1 million question, but I completely agree about everything you said about research nurses and the need for taking good care of their experience and knowledge. But how do you think we as an industry can convince or help sponsors and major CROs to actually involve experienced research nurses and investigators in their study design process?
That's a great question. I'm so glad you brought that up, Erik. So I think even plugging in, we have an international professional organization. It's called the International Association of Clinical Research Nurses. We're a tiny but mighty group, but we're international. And we have expert research nurses. We have those who are also new, so wide spectrum. We just actually had our conference here in the US. Hazel was also a participant, so you can kind of bug her a bit. But we're a great resource for sponsors to reach out to, CROs as well, and say, hey, we just need a consult. We're looking to do this type of thing. What do you think? We have research committees that are made out of a team of 20 strong expert nurses who can help with those types of questions and also provide advocacy and awareness for research nursing voice in the protocol design. So we would be happy to help.
Are there any more questions for Elizabeth? Erik, I'm unsure if it's any other presenters after this. I think this, just a second. Right, so thank you all presenters and participants for taking part in this webinar today. Should you have any questions later on, you can always email us, the organizers, and we will pass them on to the presenters. And the webinar has been filmed, so you will be able to look at it later as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for taking part, and have a nice day. Bye.